then they kind of got all the way up to 4 Sims. And right now we're actually kind of consolidating back down to 2. But the community itself as a whole, once it moved, those in September it'll make 6 years that those Sims as a continent have been in place, and there's various nonprofits that have offices there. TechSoup offers free office space for those that are nonprofit focused in their initiatives and mission. So we have varying organizations that have office space there, and we have social events, and we have the weekly meeting. And that's kind of the broader history of how the space came to be.
And I think at the weekly meeting you have regular presentations, don't you, from people working in the non-profit sector and things of interest to the non-profit sector as well.
Yes, yeah. Sometimes there are others within within Second Life who have nonprofit or social good sort of things that are going on, whether that be people like Servana or Gentle who talk about their communities or events that are happening, or bringing in broader people who are doing things like Relay for Life, or also kind of like-minded crossover things where maybe there are people who are doing interesting things with Second Life in a technological way that nonprofits could learn to use tools from. So we've had presentations from others that are creating tools or doing interesting projects. Some of it too also that fall into sort of some of the librarian and education space as well. So there's kind of a crossover and in that regard as well. And that's kind of the weekly meetings. There's also sort of, like I said, social events that are broader networking kind of things.
It seems to me that you have the most wonderful ability within the non-profits group to network and share experiences. You seem to be one of the best connected groups that I've come across in Second Life.
I guess there's probably a good foundation of us that have been in the space for quite a while, and beyond being interested in and focused on nonprofit or various sort of social good things, I think a lot of us are broadly community in Second Life oriented in general. So you'll see that it crosses over into arts group, or like I said, the education sort of side of things, or into various sort of social things. I think and then everybody brings those connections together. So I guess sometimes it can seem that way, but thank you for noticing.
I was going to say another thing that strikes me is that with Virtual Ability Island you have one of the best introductions to Second Life that I've come across for anyone, regardless of ability. Can you say a little about that, Gentle? Meaning you have to switch typing mode, I'm sorry.
No, I just have to turn my microphone on. It would help. If Oro doesn't hear me, she can't type. Yes. We have a orientation to Second Life that is based on 2 principles, one of which is important for all of us, and one of which is very important for people with disabilities. The first principle is the principle of andragogy. It is actually an educational theory that relates to how adults learn. And so we wanted to make sure that the instruction on the basic skills of Second Life was appropriate for adults. That's different than the way children learn. And then the second principle is the principle of universal design. Universal design is an approach to designing built structures that are accessible. If I look at this auditorium, I see that there are stair steps here, so a person with a wheelchair couldn't go up and down the stair steps. I also noted that in general there isn't transcription, so a deaf person might not be able to interact with this panel, but we have a transcriptionist with Orinoke, and so we do have people who can help. universal design creates structures that are accessible to everyone. So you won't find those blue wheelchair signs on our island because the whole island is accessible. We don't have to segregate the places that are accessible from the ones that aren't. So that's the idea behind our orientation training.
That's brilliant. And it is such a wonderfully clear, logical progression. I wish, in a way, that Linden Lab could work with you, perhaps to create a more universal learning experience. Or perhaps they are and you're just not allowed to say. Okay.
Switching back. Actually, I was involved with the design of Please Don't Shoot Any Arrows at Me, Viewer 2, in terms of the accessibility of it. And Linden Lab has always increased the accessibility of their viewers with every version. And we're trying to help them learn more about accessibility. But you see, the accessibility of builds, because of the way this world runs, because we are the ones who are doing the building, it's our responsibility to make the environment of Second Life accessible. Linden Lab didn't build this auditorium. We did. So we need to take that responsibility.
Can I turn to you, Savannah, for a moment? I noticed that you're wearing a Mayo Clinic tag. Have you been working with Mayo Clinic?
No, but I'm interested in public health. What mainly brought me in here was my interest in HIV awareness and how it can be used for nonprofits who are reaching out to various communities for public health. The work at the Mayo Clinic is fascinating since they are members of the nonprofit community. And I'm hoping more public health organizations will come into the nonprofit community.
Yes, we did a Designing Well show with the Mayo Clinic, and it was very interesting to hear the extent to which they were working with non-profits and support groups in Second Life to build a really kind of rounded public health approach within Second Life. Do you feel that that's an important element that Second Life has, of being able to bring, I'm asking this as a kind of open question to all three of you, that Second Life has a role to play in providing support to people?
Well, I must say I came in because I'm a medical technologist by profession, and what brought me in initially was the knowledge that Centers of Disease Control had a site in Will, which they no longer have. I hope they'll get it back up. But that's when I discovered, matter of fact, I discovered virtuality, and the support groups that are involved there that's connected to them is what really made me realize the value of the virtual community for support organizations, support groups. And there's quite a few individuals I could see them coming into this community looking for that support rather than even reached out to it in the real life or the real world.
This is gentle, so Oro can change over again. What we found in Second Life was that people don't necessarily come to Second Life for support, but they find it here as a plus or a bonus. And we've identified over 120 different peer support communities in Second Life for various disabilities or various types of chronic illnesses. And I think that speaks to the need for support as well as for the ability of a virtual world to provide the support.
And for my own self, I mean, definitely I've seen through the years that Second Life and those who kind of have come, that I've come in contact with over the years, that there's a huge sense of sort of a common good philanthropic soul that runs throughout. I mean, you can see that as evidence in things like Relay for Life, and how that continues on, and how strong of a collective community campaign that is, and that innately interests me, sort of how people come together in these communities and kind of have that sort of sense of like, how do we do good, and how do we kind of help solve problems, or fundraise, or those sort of things. So I think I even see it on a broader level beyond even just the things that the various nonprofits that I have come in contact with focus on.
It seems to me that quite a few organizations, I mean, we talk about the era of the big companies coming into Second Life around 2006, 2007, with the big hype of the times. It seems to me that in a way happened to some non-profits too, that they came in maybe with slightly unrealistic expectations of what Second Life could deliver. I know I gave a couple of presentations to non-profit groups in the UK, and they were asking me questions like, well, how long would it take to organise an event in Second Life? And I was saying, well, you'd probably need to put in, the man hours would be different, but you would still need to put in significant, I suppose, person hours in order to organise a Second Life event. And they were rather shocked. It was as though because it's virtual it must be immediate. And I think this may have been an attitude with some non-profits back in the bulge years. What do you think? Do you think that there was a kind of rush in and then a decline out, or is it that a misperception?
You can go first, Sarana.
What I have found, it's about relationships and established relationships in here. That's why I found to be a major plus for this community. And in Second Life, it's not like an overnight thing. You develop the relationships, you develop that collaborative, or you feel that collaborative interaction between the various organizations. That's which is a major plus for even coming to the community.
And I agree on that. So for my thoughts on it now, I mean, having been in Second Life since, like I said, early 2005, I've, was part of that kind of wave too, of watching everybody sort of come in, and, I think we hit the million registered user mark in that late 2006, early 2007 point, and then it kind of burst from there, and then it was on Business Week and all that. And I think a lot of people rushed in, whether they were nonprofits or businesses, and, sort of there was a percentage of people who miscalculated what its strengths were, maybe seeing it as a 3D ad buy, maybe seeing it as you said, sort of a lesser quick effort way of accomplishing something. I think, even in the idea of the fundraising things, Relay for Life is such a success, so that sort of tempted some people to come in and think that they could also do that. I think ultimately the root of it really does kind of come down to the strength of communities, and I think the ability that the effort and the ability that it takes to sort of generate those communities and connections is really the success of any project or any of those sort of things. So it takes a certain amount of effort and dedication, and obviously care into doing that. So unless somebody really sees that, I mean, it's just a tool like any other thing, that if they're not understanding the users and the community behind it, I think, they probably tend to fall away after a bit. But, having organized even real life events, and the fact that I organized the Second Life community conventions, which were the real life Second Life user conventions, and the amount of work that goes into that, and having to sort of be a responsive listener to what the community really wants. it's a kind of a not as easy, and it takes work. And I think it's the same way with other things. So you have to put in effort. It isn't just an instant. Virtual isn't instant.
I think that's a wonderful way of putting it. Gentle, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I've actually forgotten the question with all this typing. Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, I was talking about how there was sort of a rush of people in 2006, 2007, both businesses and non-profits, and then there was a kind of more gentle fading away of people. Do you feel that happened, and what encouraged some people to stay and some people to go? Did people misinterpret? Did some groups misinterpret what Second Life could do?
Well, I have to say that we're seeing the opposite trend in virtual ability. We have just yesterday taken in our 800th member.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
3/4 of our members have one or more disabilities. 1/4 of our membership is a spouse of a person with a disability, or a child of a person with a disability, or a caregiver, or a parent. Some of our members are researchers, some of our members are medical professionals, but the vast majority of our members are people with disabilities. We're starting to see people with more and more severe disabilities. Our 800th member is actually totally blind.
That's very interesting. And to have such a range of people finding Second Life can benefit them. It's really fascinating.
And I have to say, sort of the most profound example of something like that, I remember an educational conference. I think Pathfinder, when he was still in Linden, helped to organize. They had sort of an educational conference that Linden Lab had put on. I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago or so. I, at the time, I was helping. I was sort of helping with Global Kids, and after an event we spoke at, there were people mulling about and asking for help, and I remember sort of helping out somebody who was fairly new and was extremely excited, and I think we've all experienced that, especially if you've been here for a few years, that like new kind of SL user glow that is nice to sort of see. And I helped them out, and they were looking actually for somebody either from Virtual Ability or at the time there was another org, GIMP Girl, that they were looking for somebody that, and I directed them to that disability group to later then find out that they were a quadriplegic, accessing Second Life through just a mouthpiece that's used as it's controlling their movements in their mouths and their mouth and that sort of stuff. So to think that when you think of the power of a medium such as this, that you can kind of give voice and legs and kind of the ability to be able to sort of participate in a fairly equal way, no matter what. I mean, that's profound to think that Second Life can kind of do that. So, and I'm sure Gentle probably has a million of those stories.
And beyond. I mean, it can give people flight. It can
Yes.
give people the ability to dive down and live underwater.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked in terms very much of people focused and non-profits that work and working with people focused organisations. Do you feel that Second Life also has a role to play with what one might call more abstract non-profits that aren't so based on people, but perhaps based on ideas?
I see Second Life as being, or the virtual community as being a great platform to present those ideas, or even just making the connection. I know when I was presenting, did a presentation in real life about the community, one of the executive directors expressed to me she had an individual who was driving 3 hours to Baltimore for a 1-hour meeting, when she wanted to use the virtual community as a way to connect that person without that travel time. And I can see that being an excellent way of connecting organizations who may have chapters or offices that's in different locations.
And I know, Savarna, you have done also work with faith-based orgs, so not necessarily directly related to a faith-based org, but more so for the sake of historic preservation. I own a cathedral in the sim Darkwood, which is sort of the older initial kind of core grid of sims, maybe the 12th or 13th, somewhere in that first sort of grouping of sims to come online, and Linden Labs' first experimentations with themed communities. So it was a fantasy themed community that was voted on by a survey at the time of residents. This predates my avatar. This is 2003 that we're talking here. And so I own, through that being sort of the first kind of community I had a home in, I bought a plot from a neighbor there, and I own a cathedral. And so at this point, it's the oldest still standing, still res, non-moved cathedral in Second Life. And it's non-denominational, so this kind of goes back to that idea of like concepts and ideas. I have in the back area, of which I set up sort of right after the Katrina disaster had happened, a kind of candle devotion area for people to light a candle and leave a message. There are hundreds of candles there now. I mean, they've built up over the years. You can go to Darkwood. It's pretty much the big giant cathedral in the middle of the sim. You can go there and you can sort of see how people relate to this sort of, it's not, like I said, any religious denomination, but people relate to it in a spiritual sense, as a spiritual space, even though it isn't. It's, even though it isn't in real life, they sort of approach it in a similar way. So, that I think is a good example of how kind of conceptually, a space or sort of what something or a project somebody might do in this space could have that kind of power and connection to people.
Okay, and this is Gentle. And I just want to note that among the many members of the Nonprofit Commons, we do have nonprofits that are involved with non-people related things. We have some horse rescues. We have had some other types of animal services that have been involved in those. We have arts and other cultural organizations. I mean, obviously that's made by people, but I am not sure that it is the same as some of the other organizations that we've talked about. So there really is a wide variety of organizations within the nonprofit commons.
And I think that's what makes the nonprofit commons community so exciting to me is the diversity. I mean, the interests are vast, the subject matters are vast, and it just brings about a great, what's the word I want, connection, or just a learning experience. You get to learn about other organizations, other interests, and it just broadens one's whole horizon being involved in the community.
That's terrific. Do you feel, how do you feel the future looks for non-profits? Where do you see them as going within, not just within Second Life, but within virtual worlds as a whole? I think several of you have got connections with other virtual worlds as well, if I'm not mistaken. Perhaps you could say a little about that, and also where you see the future for virtual worlds as being.
As for myself, as one who have seen several nonprofits be shut down or had to cut back due to some of the budget cutbacks, I can see virtual worlds playing a major role where they may not have the funding to send their members to various conferences, or may not have the money to have as many meetings on a physical plane, when they can use a virtual platform to meet I have a virtual platform to network, and I can see it as a valuable tool in the economy as it's turning for the nonprofits in the real life world.
I don't know if you want to say anything, Gentle, or...
Oh, I can. Sure. One thing that's unique about Virtual Ability is that we think we're the first nonprofit that actually started in a virtual world and then went to the physical world, the real world, to incorporate as a nonprofit. Now, there are others that have done that since then. We're very happy to help them out. But that, I think, is something you're going to see more. Nonprofits that start in the virtual setting and then go into the physical setting to incorporate and do all the legal stuff.
Yep, and there's no doubt to add to that this is a space, especially if you are a nonprofit and you're working on the way that, with the internet and other technologies, you can afford to have more dispersed, like no matter where people are located within your nonprofit or your team, you can connect with them here much easier than a virtual space. So, I think it kind of makes sort of some of the problems of everybody being having to be in the same office, kind of not a problem. Going sort of in a far future thing, now you brought up other platforms. There's a lot of interesting developments with other sort of devices connecting to virtual worlds or game spaces in that way. Like you look at things like the Oculus Rift, which is a virtual reality headset, or how people have used Kinect, which is very much a kinesthetic way of being able to navigate your avatar. And I think you'll see sort of. I think you'll start to see sort of more breakdowns of that, and then also people talk about Google Glass, where you have this sort of mix of a layer of virtual reality on top of reality. So I think there's room for the expansion of, it's not only places like Second Life, but other virtual worlds in that way, that you'll see more of a blending of the real into real world.
That's very interesting. I would like at this point to throw the discussion open and see if anyone in the audience has questions for us. Or rather for my guests. I'm quite sure you don't need to ask me questions.
I promise none of us bites.
Well, rather than the questions, I would like to add something that has been a big plus for me, another plus. I have so many pluses, but it's the mentors group in the nonprofit commons. That is an excellent way of learning about what is going on. It helped me as a newbie when I came in, for the support that I got from the community members. That made me stay. That was where the members reached out to me as a newbie. That encouraged me to stay, and by me staying, I learned about the community and saw the collaboration that went on in the community. But the Mentors Group and the Mentor Center is a very valuable component of Nonprofit Commons, and I really applaud all the individuals who are involved with the Mentor Center.
Yeah, the community has some amazingly dedicated, in essence, volunteers. We all are. And I think that, I think the success of a lot of people that are new to Second Life relies heavily on the people that they initially meet, or if they're able to get into a supporting community, whether that be Nonprofit Commons, or if it's a social interest one, or if they're an educator, an educational one. But I think if that I think makes ultimately, Second Life a stickier place, that people know that there's support there and there's people to help them. And I know, whether it be at Nonprofit Commons, I'm sure Gentle can also speak to what that's like in regards to supporting a community in the virtual ability side of things as well.
Yeah, I can tell you a story about a research project that Virtual Ability was in. And to understand this, you have to know that researchers, when they do a pre and post study, they really want to have 50% or more of the people stick around for the post. And in our research project, we had, it was between 35 and 40% that stuck around. And the researchers were so disappointed. They thought this was just a terrible result. They were very upset until I pointed them to the overall Second Life retention rate, which the last time it was published was, 10% maximum? So we said to them, look, we're actually doing much better than Second Life as a whole. This means something very positive about our research and about our community.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that comes down to multiple things. Obviously, Virtual Ability has a wonderful welcome training area, which that helps orient people initially and gives them sort of the tools that they'll need to sort of function and thrive a little bit. And then, as I said, like whether it be Virtual Ability or Nonprofit Commons, like finding a supporting community that you can find affinity with, I think amazingly gets people to sort of stay and bucks that like really low retention rate percentage that you just mentioned.
Cinders Vale was asking an interesting question about nationalities. Do you find that you get people coming from communities across the world?
We do. I mean, we have a pretty diverse, we have people that log in from various countries in Europe. We have several people from Asia. I know we have a member who pops in a lot from Japan. We have, I know Franz is in the crowd right now. He's in Amsterdam. We tend to have a mixed, a pretty good mix of nationalities and those from various countries. Our weekly meetings are held on Friday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Second Life time. So I think in some ways that a lot people that are in, across the globe in that way, if they're in Japan or if they're in Australia, that they still could kind of peek in, and it's not unthinkable because it's fairly early in California at Second Life time. So.
And it's interesting that when I tell my colleagues about Second Life and the virtual community, I tell them that it is a global community. And it's like they kind of step back on that and say it's a global community. You may find people from, you will find people from other communities in other countries.
And we know that in the Virtual Ability community, we have members from all but one continent. Nobody in our community is from Antarctica yet. And I think it's probably because they don't take disabled scientists to Antarctica, and they're probably too darn busy anyhow to even participate in a virtual world.
Yes, I can believe that. So, having a worldwide community, do you see that as a definite plus of working in non-profits, do you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially for certain issue-based things. Like, you think about if somebody's working on a nonprofit that has to do with either it's, as Servana is, focused on health-focused things, or if you're working on women's issues or that kind of thing, or in Gentle's case on disability-focused things, it allows you to have that broader perspective of what's going on, sort of like issue and advocacy-wise in those other countries as well. and so that can give you kind of profound insight that wouldn't be easily as easy to attain, without having like direct friends that are kind of all over the globe in that way. So I think it could be very helpful.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm going to jump in myself at that point because I was involved in organising the OBR 1 Billion Rising event back in February, and it was really quite wonderful how we were able to draw on people from across the globe and be part of something that was very much a global movement with people taking part right across the world. And to give it a reflect it in a virtual world. The organisers were very excited about us being there, and we were very excited too. And in fact, the video that we made was filmed by the camera woman who's filming us right now, because this talk is going to appear on YouTube shortly, I believe.
Good to know. I think even to your point in that, I don't know if you the beginnings of the Relay for Life, if you know Jade Lilly, who isn't on as much in Second Life these days, though he works for a nonprofit actually in the Virginia area. He initially posed the question if they could have Second Life as a chapter area in the beginning, and they were like, what are you talking about? And then they were like, sure, whatever. He sort of did that first, sort of helped lead that first Relay for Life event, and then sort of sent them this check for thousands and thousands of dollars, and that sort of made them sit up and really take notice that this was a valid space, that was a kind of global initiative, and ultimately, though that's changed over time, and for several years the American Cancer Society actually got directly involved with Relay for Life and had ambassadors here and sort of staff that was involved on that level, because they saw it as a important part of their global outreach, and they still do.
And as well as in the faith base, I remember when shortly after I came into Second Life, I had one of our missionaries is in Great Britain who texted me and asked me if I'd been to the Life TV church, and that made me realize that there's a large, growing faith-based community within the Second Life.
That's interesting. I've come across some churches within Second Life, some non-denominational, and I've come across also Jewish organisations here as well. But there's presumably a whole range. I think there are a few Muslim communities too.
One of my colleagues expressed to me, matter of fact, he asked me one day, did I know of a church in Second Life that had a service at 8:30. He was disabled, and he did not feel comfortable or would not be able to go to a physical church. He was attending his church services in Second Life. He said the radio was okay, TV was okay, but it was not like the interaction that he had in Second Life, since that was his alternate to the physical attending of services.
This is gentle, and that's obviously another benefit for people with severe disabilities. We have a young man who is Jewish and is confined to his bed and hadn't been to services in a long, long time. So it was very important for him to connect with his faith in Second Life.
It can be very powerful. As I just typed there, there's been long-standing sort of faith groups that have met. I think there's still a regular Unitarian group that meets and has service. I know that the former kind of organizer of the nonprofit Commons was Quaker, and there was a Quaker group that met here in Second Life. And as you said, sort of other Jewish and Christian faiths as well. And So, it can be a base, and I know you brought up Muslim, though not faith-based, but like back to kind of a cultural, ethnic kind of tie-in, when a lot of the Arab Spring was going on in Egypt and sort of those sort of things. There were actually sort of people who were coming together who were in various places around the world, or in Egypt itself if they could get in here, and come together kind of to talk on and support and sort of have it as a cultural meeting place to sort of come together and share what was happening.
It's aspects like that of Second Life that very often get overlooked. And how can we get the message out, do you think? Can you think of ways in which we can get the message out as how useful and how Second Life can do these things?
Is gentle. And one of the ways that virtual ability gets the message out is through our website. And we're starting to work on other social media. Zinnia will be happy about that. We're also getting a lot of referrals from other disability groups in the real world. And we also do a lot of research work, and the research projects tend to bring people into the virtual worlds. So we have a variety of strategies.
This is Savannah. I'm always putting things on my Facebook page or tweeting about what's going on in Second Life. I have my own Twitter account, and I'm put things on my blog. I try to show my real life colleagues just what is going on, and just let them know this is a community, and this is what we're doing in our community. As a matter of fact, today at the conference I was attending today, there's an individual there who has a AIDS outreach in Uganda, and I was mentioning to her, well, I need to connect you to a colleague of mine from Feed the Smile who's based in Second Life. And I started to realize that's that real to virtual real concept that I am just so fascinated by. I just enjoy sharing what goes on in this community with my real life colleagues.
And this is Rhiannon. So, yeah, I mean, as we definitely use, for the outreach for nonprofit commons, we use social media of various sorts, so Google, Facebook, Twitter. And then the strength, I think, of sort of any good community is sort of the individual members that are part of it. So a lot of the outreach and the sort of going forward about what goes on happens even between the member level of those who are there. So everybody collectively reaching out to their groups and connections to, as Savannah and Gentle was saying. I think the more that there can kind of be that pollination, there's I regularly go to a lot of other, even educational or sort of social good or that kind of thing events in the grid, and try to kind of keep connected. To Saffia's point at the beginning, like, I think there's sort of power in trying to keep connected with people here, and that helps get the word at least out here within the space. It's I think in the kind of outside of Second Life itself and outside of our immediate connections, when going to events, as much as I can too, I try to preface the work that I do in Second Life and other virtual worlds. Sometimes that, I've been presenting myself as doing that professionally since 2007. That's when I left sort of started to work pretty much predominantly one way or another, focused on something virtual worlds, and left my other position before that. So, I think letting people know about the work you're doing outside hopefully helps grow that too, that acknowledgement and of what we're doing here.
I can tell a funny story. I've actually been connected with you, I think, on various social media, like Google Plus and Facebook, for quite a while, Rhiannon. But I didn't realise until you sent me an email today, which had your real life name on it. I was like, oh, yeah, right.
Like, I know her. Like, I know the real her.
I know the real her, yes.
Yeah. Go on.
I think quite a few of us kind of move between real and virtual. I actually managed to convince Google Plus that they should let me be virtual me on Google Plus, which took a week or so to convince them that they wanted virtual me on Google Plus, but they finally agreed to it.
Yeah, that was a hot topic for a while. The whole because Google had been around for a long time, and a lot of people used it as their mail client, their webmail. And then when they created the social network, they sort of instituted rules for the social network that they wanted to try to. That I think initially were kind of akin to Facebook, that Facebook has rules that you're supposed to be an actual person. Your identity is your actual real life identity, though people still sign up for avatar accounts, of course, under their avatar names. But Facebook culls through them, and sometimes you'll lose virtual named friends from time to time because of that. And Google kind of had initially a policy similar until people sort of spoke up, because a lot of us had our emails for years and years prior to there ever being a social network attached to it. And eventually, like you said, Saffia, you could kind of defend, like, if this is a name that you commonly used, like an actual pseudonym that, you weren't just making it up to grief people, and that, you had to go through a process sometimes, but then, they sort of allowed people to be able to kind of use pseudonymous names. But I know, from my interactions, I organized, like I said, the SLCCs. The rest of the people on the board, like Philippe Touk, if people know her from the educational world, and a few other people on our board who use their avatar names on Google, actually got their accounts closed or frozen for a bit until they had to prove who they were, which is scary when your phone, if you have a Android phone, it's attached to it. Suddenly you have no email, you have no phone, and yep, you have to prove you're more than just a fake, that your avatar is actually you.
Yeah, that's a toughie. I was interested to see in the Drax files that Rod Humble was defending the concept of being able to use your avatar identity, because that is something that is very powerful in Second Life.
When we did SLCC in Oakland in 2011, in his keynote, that was sort of the first, I think, public sort of speech to the community. And he mentioned that, he started to sort of mention the aspect of that we all have aspects of our identity that we kind of, put towards the various sort of parts of our day and community and that kind of thing. So the you that you are at work is a little bit different than the you present at home, is a little different than maybe the you might present at like your social group, or your church, and so yes, he seems to be really be a big proponent that that anonymity, the ability to be able to have to kind of have that and have that here as well is important. And I know, of course, the bad sides of that are, some people think with anonymity that griefing can run rampant. But I also think, on the other side of it, not that doesn't happen, but I think also on the other side of that people, it brings out sort of, I think, some of the good nature of people in a way too. There's sort of this being able to be kind of, socially and philanthropically good and not necessarily weighing it upon other things. Like, I think the culture that has come up and been created by Second Life is innately, fairly good most of the time and fairly giving. If you think about all these sort of outpourings of support or fundraising or outreach here and there, I think for the most part, most people are fairly good, even if they are anonymous avatars most of the time. Though, as you said, Saffia, to my point, I'm fairly, my real life and Second Life are fairly connected, having done sort of things professionally, so.
I would add briefly that it's slightly ironic. One of the great things about the anonymity of Second Life was the ability to have second names, which has been taken cruelly, harshly taken away from us, I feel. And I would love to see coming back. So I think that helps the whole anonymity and also breeds a sense of community and family.
You mean display names?
I mean usernames, like I'm Saffia
yes,
Widdershins, and I
Yes.
periodically run into other Widdershins who are like cousins, extended family. I know they're all born around the same time.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I've heard of people sort of having like family reunions in that way. Chatnoir was never a popular name, so there aren't very many of us, and there were only a few of us that kind of kept kicking around, and I don't think I've seen anybody in a long time with mine. So,
I think that's good. It's like, there are an awful lot of Smiths in the world, but only a few Lutwiches, which is my mother's family name, and a rapidly dying out one. So I think it's good that some of us have, small families, and there are others, like the writers. There's still a lot of writers and a lot of magics around, I find. Yes, the O family is also a good one.
and actually, the ability to have some sort of last name is not completely out of the system. Linden Lab, through Second Life, still does have the registration API capabilities, and if you fall into a certain use case, you can use that to register people in. That used to be more broadly used for the community gateways, but then at this point it's only specific scenarios. So in the case of like if you brought in a population that had to be locked down to an estate, or like because they were, say, underage in some ways, like you were doing a scenario where you had some youth in that you wanted to make sure were locked to an estate or in an educational setting, you could still actually have access to the API and get a last name. So there's a handful of, and Franz Charming probably knows this number, there's maybe 15, 20 last names they still use in the back system.
That's interesting. Okay, well, I'm going to ask if there are any final questions, because I think we're coming to the end of our talk, and fortunately we've been able to fit in, I think, the best part of an hour, even though we were late starting, for which apologies from me. I can now see everyone! A couple of people are a bit grey, but I can, things are pretty much back to normal.
Orinoco has a question.
Yeah, Orinoco's asking, what work is Non-Profit Commons doing with young people or youth groups?
There were a lot more sort of youth-focused, I think, work going on directly in Second Life. Of course, there used to be a teen Second Life, a whole separate sort of grid that anybody that was under 18 from like that, 13 to 18 range could take part in. So there was a lot of active, people actually directly working with teens and youth in that space. In 2010, sort of later in the year, 2010, Linden Lab closed down Teen Second Life, and anybody then who was 16 and above kind of was allowed to be on the grid. So you will see some, people who are kind of older high school age that can still be in the grid, though they're just a sort of G-rated account that can't kind of option into seeing mature areas. But anybody 13 to 15 could no longer access in that direct way. So you still see people. I still think there's still educational programs that are directly working with youth. Through sort of some direct work on a side project. I work with Georgia Tech on an initiative where they're using 2 SIMs to work with disabled, like basically peer mentoring in science, technology, engineering, and math in STEM. They're using this space as a peer mentoring space for these various STEM initiatives in both the high school and the college level. And so, they're having, they actually have like one sim for each kind of age group, and there are collective events that they get together at, and there's mentoring of, mentors that actually sort of mentor directly within Second Life. And in a case like that, that doesn't matter if they had, whatever, if they weren't able to physically or through their disability unable to actually attend a mentoring session, they would be able to log into Second Life and still do that. And he's the Robert Todd, the director of that, came and spoke to us at MPC, and so there's still people doing stuff, and we have some, I think some more broader issue-based orgs within NPC that falls also into youth-related things, like some of the health-related stuff that also falls into there, and some of the arts-focused stuff. But I think there's probably a little less in regards, or it sort of shook up some of the direct work that might be happening with when the teen grid sort of closed.
Of course, there were grids that were aimed more specifically at that kind of market. Reaction Grid, I know, had quite a lot of connection with youth work. And
I think
there's Jocada, or however you pronounce it as well.
Yep, Joy Katie, I think. And I mean, I think Silvana can speak to that because she has space in Joycadia, don't you? I think.
Yes, I have my laboratory in Joycadia, and I refer a lot of programs that have youth to Joycadia. And I'm also in Kitely as well, which is I'm moving a lot of my things into Kitely because I had to reduce my project from here. But this always be a base. But I found a lot of youth programs can go in there because they can have their private parcels or projects they may want to have. But Joycadia was an excellent environment for youth programs. I always encourage the nonprofits. You have your base, you have your operations in the nonprofit commons, and if you have a youth program, you may want to have them in open sims. But the whole thing is using this environment. It's too valuable a platform not to be used.
Yeah, the resources of the greater community and sort of being able to share, like whether it be assets and resources and know that you have access to all these groups is stronger in Second Life. So as a grid proper, the community is still much stronger here than when if you look into, say, the various sort of open sim variant grids. And I think you're seeing sort of more. You're definitely seeing a lot of growth in the various open sim things. And as Sarvana said, a lot of people will kind of set up a project in a grid that's either attached to something like OS Grid or on Kitely or Joycadia or sort of one of these spaces, and then still come here, to either meet in nonprofit commons or to meet like in ISTE or these various, communities where people still kind of come together to sort of share and collaborate in that way, even if they're doing some part of their work outside of Second Life.
Yes, the opportunity to connect and communicate and collaborate is awesome in nonprofit commons, even in real or real life. And that's one of the big pluses. I got to meet quite a couple of members from the nonprofit commons in real life, and that was just solidifies the whole connection and interaction you have within this community.
That's brilliant. Okay, does anyone have any final questions? Giving you one last chance to ask your questions now, otherwise you're going to have to go to a Friday morning meeting.
Yes, this Friday, 8:30 a.m.
Okay, the video of this meeting will be available shortly on YouTube, and I will give the address to Rhiannon and Gentle, and they can spread the word, hopefully, on it.
We can post it up on our blog. And for those that are interested, I'm going to put a bunch of links into the chat. Those are sort of the various places to kind of find out about Nonprofit Commons. And the slurl, let me grab a slurl. The meetings, like I said, are 8:30 a.m.
Which is on my Google Calendar. I try not to miss, although sometimes real life keeps me away.
And that link actually will open up the Slurl URL. But yeah, 8:30 a.m. and they go to 10 a.m. And we have it set up where there's sort of announcement, or everybody gets to introduce each other, which that's always, as sort of much as that sounds sort of funny, that's actually like a really good point. I mean, we don't press people to have to give their real identity, but we sort of do kind of put that out there, the idea of people sharing sort of what they're doing and what orgs they come from. So there's an introduction in the beginning, and then we move on to announcement stuff. Our mentors sort of present on some topic or idea or useful skill or bit of info that they might want to share, and then we usually go into our featured presenter. And then we, kind of break for like people sharing other events and general open mic. And I encourage anybody, if you're doing any interesting work, definitely reach out to me, and we would be happy to feature you as a presenter at some meeting if it is relevant to the overall community.
Can I just have a quick word? Because this is going on YouTube, I'm actually going to read out a few of those links that you just posted. What is the name of the island where the meeting takes place?
It's actually it's Plush Nonprofit Commons.
Plush Nonprofit Commons.
Yep. So if you do a search in for Nonprofit Commons, you should be able to. You'll get sort of two sims, one that's Aloft Nonprofit Commons and the other one that's Plush. And
you can also look for nonprofitcommons.org on the web. That will take you to the blog. And I presume from the blog they'll be able to find their way to the wiki and Twitter and Facebook and the G+ community and the Google group and the Google account.
I know, we're everywhere. It's interesting, interesting to sort of see people, the interactions outside. But yes, if you go to the main nonprofitcommons.org blog, you'll get the links to everything else. And you'll also, we try to, that's another thing to actually note if you do come to the meetings, and you're seeing today that Gentle and Oronoke are sort of being our transcriptionists to sort of get a text log here. We actually hold the meetings almost always, unless there's some sort of special occasion, certain occasion, we hold them in text only to make it accessible and to make a transcript and sort of to be able to have people to kind of have that reference for the information later on as well. So almost all of our past meetings, transcripts or of some sort are up on that site as well. So there's lots to, if you've missed meetings, or if there's particular subjects that you're interested in that are nonprofit or educational or social good focused, you can peruse through all that too on nonprofitcommons.org.
You're always connected to the community.
That's fantastic. Okay, well, the time has now reached 5:30. So I'm going to call an end to the meeting. I'd like to thank my guests for joining me, Gentle Heron, Rhiannon Chatnoir, and Savannah Halen. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.
And thank you also to our wonderful audience out there who've been very lively and asked us questions and made comments, and it's been great. And there will be another talk tomorrow. Tomorrow there's another talk at 4 where, contrast to this one, we're going to be meeting the tiny community. So I suspect that there will be river dancing.
That's great.
Okay, thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you for having us.